to Nicole.
Perfect. Thanks, Seven. I will just jump right in. And Chris, I know you're the only one here live, but I'm hopeful that other people will watch the recording. So I'm going to talk like I have an audience of 100. But feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions or something that you want more details on. Otherwise, I'm just going to run through a little bit of what we saw in the last short session that just wrapped up a few weeks ago. Um, so just by way of background and introduction, my name is Nicole Mann. As Devin said, I'm the lobbyist for the Oregon Wheat Growers League. And it really is an honor to be the voice of wheat producers across our state inside of the Capitol and to have the opportunity to elevate your voice on issues that impact you and your operation. Unfortunately, that is easier said than done in the Oregon legislature. Since I began representing the league about 6 years ago, we've seen a consistent flow of policies that make it harder and more expensive for our members to operate here in the state of Oregon. And so we're going to talk about some of those today, some that we saw in the last session as we jump into a review. I will say it is mostly highlights, a few lowlights, but overall the session was generally speaking a good one for the Oregon Wheat Growers League, which is a little bit of a breath of fresh air. Before I do that, though, I want to make sure that I thank the Wheat Growers League Executive Committee. Nothing is more impactful than constituents being at the state capitol, taking time out of their busy schedules away from their businesses and their families to drive to Salem. And for a lot of our wheat producers, that is a very long drive. And so I just want to say thank you to the executive committee for all the time and effort that they put in over the last year during our legislative session. They're often the people that will submit testimony for me and always there, when Amanda or I call them. So a special shout out to them for all of their work in the last session. All right, let's jump into session. We just wrapped up our what we call short session. Constitutionally, we have 35 days to do the business of the state. We finished this year in 32 days, which was delightful. We got to end on a Friday instead of working Saturday and Sunday, which selfishly I thought was wonderful. Um, we did see the legislators bring forward a little over 300 bills. I think we saw 304 bills and resolutions to be exact. And of those, we ended up passing 153, which is a surprisingly large number and a lot of policies to debate and thoroughly review in 32 days, minus your weekends. So it was busy and a lot. There is something to be said for having bill limits so that we wouldn't have that many, but it was a lot of bills. Leading up to session, HR 1, you would probably recognize it, referred to as the One Big Beautiful Bill, really dominated the headlines and the conversations in Salem, resulting in legislative leadership pretty much preparing us for a session of budget cuts to programs, telling us not to bring any proposals for new programs to be developed or any bills that had a fiscal component to it. So anything that would require additional investment by the state, be that a computer program or a body to do the work, et cetera. They told us it would not be funded. But for all that belly aching about the budget, it's really important to remember the context because the state budget has more than doubled in just the last 10 years. So, as they were preparing us for everything that was a result of the One Big Beautiful Bill and what's going on at the federal level, there is some truth to that. And we'll talk about that when we talk about the federal disconnect that the legislature did. But overall, the state has more money than we've ever had before. So that was everything leading up to session and what they were preparing us for. Then we got into session and they still brought forward a pretty hefty agenda focused on pushing back against federal immigration policy. So we saw a handful of bills around ICE, rescheduling the transportation tax vote, which was highly political. We'll talk about where that landed. I'm sure you saw it in the news. Campaign finance reform, and then balancing the state budget. So we had our work cut out for us. For the league specifically, our session was a little bit of a reprieve compared to previous sessions. As I said in my intro, our engagement really centered around labor and employment legislation, budget funding, which was making sure that we were protecting some of our key programs that we rely on, specifically around ODA, OSU statewide, FFA funding, so those budget components there. And then general relationship building with legislators in both chambers across both aisles for the purpose of trying to prepare us for what happens in the next long session. We wanted to really sort of wrap our arms around the fact that we did not have huge threats that we had to be on first base defense for, and instead say, okay, if we have a chance to breathe, how do we make sure that maybe we're ahead of the game coming into next session when we don't know what threats are there? So we spent a lot of time just on those relationships in offices, trying to put a face to the name of the Oregon Wheat Growers League. So let's dive into some key policies. I'll focus mostly on the big things that passed because that's what will impact you. But I also don't want to let some celebrations go uncelebrated in that I say some of the biggest reason why you have a lobbyist is so that the bad things don't happen. It's the bill that you never knew was supposed to happen that was going to hurt you that I can help stop, which is why you have a lobbyist. So I'll include a little bit of both. Starting off first with taxes and budget, everybody's favorite topic in the state of Oregon. Let's talk Senate Bill 1507, which is the federal disconnect bill. So typically, every year, the Oregon legislature does what we call the vanilla connect. It's a great term to just say it's a very short bill, and it just says, yes, Oregon will continue to follow the federal tax code. We will do what they do, and it sort of passes with nobody really saying anything. When they don't do the vanilla disconnect, things get a little spicy, and that's what happened this session. So in the end, I will say what Oregon ended up disconnecting from is three components from the federal tax code. The biggest one impacting our members is the disconnect from the machinery and equipment bonus depreciation in the tax code. I will say this bill was highly contentious, to say the least. Republicans fought it until the very end with amendments and minority reports and hour-long floor sessions. But it did end up passing. We worked with the Farm Bureau and the Seed Council trying to do one final push to just give an exemption for the farm machinery portion of that bonus depreciation. And Representative Bobby Levy, who I'm sure many of our members have a good relationship with, was key in getting that amendment drafted for us, sort of in the ninth hour. But the votes weren't there at the end of the day. The Democrats wanted a full disconnect from those things. So we saw them disconnect from, as I said, machinery and equipment bonus depreciation, vehicle loan interest deduction, and the qualified small business stock provisions. So those three are what we disconnected from. Um, Following the passage of the bill, I will say that the Wheat League joined other businesses in a coalition letter requesting a veto from Governor Kotek. However, that was declined and it will go into effect. So that is one piece of your taxes that I have an update on. Happy to answer any questions if there are any. Moving forward is the budget reconciliation bill. So this is just how we balance the Oregon state budget. And as I said, leading up, it was all about there's going to be budget cuts. This is going to be big, bad, and ugly. Prepare yourself. That did not happen. I think as a result of a few things. A, they found money places like vacant positions that have been vacant for over a year, that they were able to just say, okay, eliminate that position. Nobody's in it anyways. So they found some money, but also there was really a great coalition effort across the state to protect some of our key funding programs, such as FFA, OSU statewide, et cetera. So we did not see in that budget reconciliation bill, which is House Bill 5204, any cuts to ODA. We didn't see anything in OSU statewide. They saw no reductions either. And we actually saw a few specific agricultural investments. So I will highlight three of them. We did see a little over $11 million go to the Department of Forestry for wildfire efforts. For backstory, the Oregon Wheat Growers League had a seat at the table two interims ago on what we called the big Wildfire 35 group, which was a group to figure out how in the heck we're going to fund wildfire efforts in the state of Oregon. Our goal was to make sure it didn't go on the backs of landowners so for you all to pay more. We were successful in that. But in the end bill, we were short $11 million. And so the concern was, what are we going to do next session? So this was great to see general fund dollars fill that gap. So we saw that there. We saw $1 million go to Department of Ag for wolf deprivation compensation, and then $1.8 million to the Department of Ag for Japanese beetle eradication. So small investments as in the number of different investments. It was only three. However, it's a substantial amount of money, and specifically that wildfire portion was important. Otherwise, that was going to be a fight that we had next year. One other budget note as I move to a different policy area would be that the legislature did successfully rebalance ODOT's budget after the transportation package was referred to the voters. So you'll remember it was a lot of concern over maybe the sky falling, ODOT having no money. But they were able to rely heavily on elimination of those vacant positions. And they did not have to cut some of those line items that were spoken of early on, such as snowplows, de-icers, etc. None of that came to fruition. So overall in the budget, good news based on what we thought we were going to see this session. Our next biggest policy bucket was labor and employment, starting with a successful defeat for the league. House Bill 4147 is what we called the shameless Medicaid bill. And without getting too technical, the bill would have basically allowed the Oregon Employment Department and the Oregon Health Authority to compile a report on any employers with 50 or more employees who have employees who are on Medicaid, or if their employees' dependents are on Medicaid. And this also would have included contractors. So we had a lot of questions around how, if you had a contractor, that would work, and seasonal work, because you could have an employee who only works for you for obviously a specific set amount of time, be that harvest, etc. And then they go work somewhere else. How did we make sure they weren't double counted? Was one of our many questions. But the biggest concern with the bill is that we called it the shameless bill because in other states who have done this, specifically the state of Washington, they publish these reports and it names the top 20 employers based on those employee counts. So think an Amazon, for example, or maybe a Walmart. It would say that their name, and then the legislature utilizes that information in the future to propose what they're calling an employer Medicaid assessment tax. And that's what we were really afraid of. This was step one to a larger process to be able to come back to employers of any size in the state of Oregon and say, okay, you have X number of employees on Oregon Health Plan. Therefore, we're going to tax you, said employer, for not either paying your employees more money so that they are off of Oregon Health Plan or providing them employer provided health insurance. So you're going to quote unquote pay your fair share and you will be proposed this tax. To the tune of $607 is what was proposed in the state of Washington this last year per employee per month. Um, it's an astronomical amount of money that would just put ag out of business, to be quite frank. So luckily in the state of Washington, that failed this year, which is a very good sign. We were opposed to this bill for a number of reasons, of which you could probably imagine, but I just shared a few of them. And so ultimately, the bill did die in the final days of the session. I will share we expect it to return next year, and it will be a fight in the future. But we were able to hold strong, and it was a successful defeat this year, which we will celebrate. The two other bills, another one is a successful defeat, which was House Bill 4089. We would call it felony penalties for wage theft. Um, we were successful in removing any impact to our members. So if you were to look up the bill itself did pass. However, it was limited to only impacting the construction industry, no longer ag. So it's one that you don't have to worry about. Because of that, I won't spend a lot of time on the details, but I'll just share it would have made you criminally liable for things like paperwork mistakes or an accounting error on payroll, without any sort of room for a human error, like the overtime didn't go on this paycheck, it's going on next paycheck because of XYZ reason. Just pure errors that you have every intention of fixing. You would have become a criminal for that. So this goes in that bucket of really bad things that you don't have to worry about, which is lovely news. And then the last one that I'll cover is around immigration status for employment. This is obviously a topic top of mind for a lot of individuals with everything at the federal level and what we're seeing at the state level. Originally, we were concerned about this bill for a number of reasons. It was pared down significantly. So I will just say the new law is that you cannot retaliate, discriminate, or take an adverse employment action on an employee who changes their name or their social security number and hands you a new document. I don't believe that you all were doing this anyway, so I will just say continue to do what you were doing, follow the law, do not discriminate against your employees, and all will be well. If you want any more details, I'm happy to share them offline with you, though. And then the last bucket I want to cover is some other bills of interest. Let's start with the energy and environment space, which was a bit quieter this session, but also brought us sort of a mixed bag. The positive side of it being quiet was that the biggest environmental legislation that we saw was the return of what we call the Climate Superfund Bill, Senate Bill 1541. It was a repeat attempt to establish this climate superfund in Oregon, which would have charged gas companies an astronomical amount of money. It would go into a fund and, help with the climate, et cetera. We were opposed to the bill because we believe it would have increased things like gas for our members, the price of gas for our members. And we had been opposed to it in previous sessions as well, since it was basically an exact attempt. We opposed it this time. We helped lobby against that bill, and it died early on in session, which was good. The mixed bag for that in the renewable energy space was House Bill 4031, which does provide a temporary exemption from the FSEC process for renewable energy. So this was brought forward with support from Governor Kotek by the renewable energy stakeholders, and it will provide them what they're calling temporary. So it does have a sunset until 2028, but it gives them an exemption to go through the Energy Facility Siting Council, so FSEC, if they meet some specific requirements in order to, and this was the whole purpose of the bill, they said, in order to get them across the finish line before some of those federal incentives for renewable energy companies go away as a part of the HR 1. So they basically came to the state of Oregon and said, your process for permitting renewable energy is long and complex, and because of that, we won't be able to get these federal renewable energy tax credits. So help us to not have to go through that so we get these tax credits so that we meet Oregon's renewable energy goals. And the legislature said, yes, we will do that. We had concerns just about the cumulative impacts of an exemption like this across the state, and if it could decrease public comment and what are we giving up in the name of sort of fast tracking these solar projects as most of them end up on dry wheat ground. Um, I will say Representative Levy, again, one of our champions, did get some legislative intention on the record, but it was very clear that the votes were there. And so this bill did pass, which is what brings us the mixed bag in this area. And then last in this bucket, I would be remiss if I didn't cover the biggest land use legislation for our sector, which was the farm stand bill. The Wheat League followed it, but did not engage. So I'll just sort of put that out there. It did pass, and in the end, it will allow, for some broader agritourism in the state of Oregon. Again, I'm happy to send follow-up information on the specifics of that if anybody is interested. But I will say the goal of the individuals who brought the bill is to really help sort of offset the cost of being a farmer in the state and being able to allow agritourism with specific sideboards if landowners want to have that there. And so that is what the purpose was. Again, if anybody wants details, send me an email and I'm happy to share them with you. And then before I wrap up, because I know we've got about 30 minutes and I'm getting close, the final bills that I'll share from the session is that we did pass the Save the Trailblazers bill. So if you are a Blazer fan, you can breathe easy. The Moda Center is here to stay. And apparently we do have enough money because we saved the Moda Center. The transportation package vote, which I talked about in the beginning as being on their list, was successfully moved to May. So it will be on the May primary. Please get ready to turn in your ballots. It does include a number of increased taxes and fees, gas tax, registration fees, etc. So please make your voice heard and turn in your ballot in May. I will say the Republicans put up many fights to try to get that to stay on the general election ballot in November and were unsuccessful. They also challenged it in court after it passed, and again, were unsuccessful there as well. So it will be on the May ballot. Um, please turn those in. And then we did pass campaign finance reform. I won't spend too much time on this today. There are a lot of details that still need worked out with the Secretary of State. But I'll just share that it's really the first time in a generation that contribution limits will now govern political campaigns in Oregon starting next January. And that is both very cool and a little bit scary. Oregon has always been the wild, wild west when it comes to campaign contributions. You could give everything you've got to one candidate and it would be totally fine. And that's not how it's going to be anymore. And so there's a lot of reporting on all sides. If you're interested in that, we do have the wheat pack, and we can talk about that later. But I will say it will change the way that campaigns operate in the state going forward, and that will be really interesting to watch. So with that, I will end with just one more thank you for the turnout at Wheat Day. We had just over 30 Capitol meetings across both chambers and with both parties this session. That is about triple what we have ever done before. I think that it went really well. We had a great celebration in the Rotunda with cake for the 100-year anniversary. And so again, just to reiterate, when people come out from the district and we have constituents in the Capitol, your voices echo 5 times what mine could as they see me every day. So I just want to thank everybody for participating in that. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. If not, I'll give the mic back over to Devin.
Nicole, I just want to thank you very much for all your work. I love going down to the Capitol and I loved Wheat Day this year. It was so much fun. And maybe it was because it was open and we could have cake again, like the quote, good old days, like how it used to be. So that was really special. But the fact that we got so many meetings and several of them in offices we've not been in before, which I thought was great, honestly. So thank you very much.
I appreciate that.
Hey, Nicole, thanks. That was a great update and appreciate all you do for us. Just a couple of quick questions. The first is, what do you expect to be cooking between now and when the regular session starts? And then two, any predictions on the governor's race?
Let's start with the easy one. Yes, I think that when we look at what comes next, I would say in the light of the budget fears that I discussed earlier a little bit when they kind of said the sky's going to fall this session, I think that we are preparing for some major tax fights in 2027. I expect that they will be looking at major revenue raising bills next year. And so, a lot of the groups are doing studies now, trying to do our homework to figure out all of what that means. There's polling going on, run by some of the larger associations that we work with, such as OBI, et cetera, that the league is a member of. But I would say the biggest one overall that will impact everybody is going to be around taxes. They're looking for money, and we don't know where it's going to come. And then for us specifically, I think that we're going to see the return of agricultural workforce standards boards. So we defeated that, not this last session, but the last long session. And we know that they will be back. It turned into a study. That study should come to the legislature. I think it's either September or December, which will basically look at all the feedback that they gathered from farm workers on essentially what it's like to be a farm worker in the state of Oregon. And I think it's gonna point the legislature to a need for workforce standards boards. And so I think that will be pretty much our number one threat next session. that we know is coming. I think the shameless bill will be back. We've heard of conversations around that. So, we got good fixes in amendment language from where that bill started. It started if you had 50 employees, we got it up to 500. If that version had passed with the 500 for the Wheat League, we would essentially be exempt from that. So that one I'm still concerned about, but definitely workforce standards boards are a top list. And then I think it's the ones that we just don't know. What's going to happen in the renewable energy space. We're seeing so much on some of our ag land that makes me nervous. What more could they do in that area? But we know that it's a push. Those would be my best guesses for that question.
Thanks.
For elections, I don't know. I would say we don't have time today to get into those details, but continue to engage. That would be my answer. No, I think that there's no public polling out right now when it comes to the Republican primary. I think that your front runners are definitely Christine Drazen. She's got that name recognition. Representative Ed Deal has strong name recognition from his efforts on the gas tax, because he's who helped get that to the ballot. I would assume that those would be actually your probably top two front runners. But I think that Christine Drazen has done a phenomenal job, and if I was a betting person, which I am not because I've learned my lesson many a times working in this industry, I think that we will probably likely see a rematch between a Governor Kotek and a Christine Drazen, which could be really interesting, because when they ran against each other the first time, neither of them were the sitting governor. Now one of them is, and I think that sort of changes things. Um, but it's really too early to tell.
Thank you,
Ask me
Nicole.
after the May primary. All right, Devin, I think it's all yours then.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. I know it's a small group, but we'll be able to share this out with other members so they can listen or watch at their leisure. Thank you, Nicole, for giving us your time today and also for the work you do on behalf of the league and our members. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And just for anybody who watches this back on the recording, if you did have questions, feel free to email me. You can always email Amanda, and she knows how to get a hold of me as well. But it's just Nicole@daltonadvocacy.com, and I'm happy to get you guys more information. Thanks so much.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Nicole. Thanks, Devin. Nice to
Thanks.
see you, Chris.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.